Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build. Austin, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Absolutely. Where are you calling in from? Where's home base?
San Diego, California.
Awesome. Hell yeah. Yeah. So we were just chatting right before we hit record, and you're telling me your friend paints those drawings you got behind you. Those are amazing stuff. I'd love for you to plug his name in.
Yeah, John Sims. He's a good friend of mine. He actually deployed with me to Iraq in 2007, 2008. Infantry dude. He lives back in Oklahoma, where I'm from originally, and he actually is running one of the companies that I own, a small service business for me as well. And he paints on the side, and he's done a great job. That one's on the floor right there, just because I just got it in today. I just unwrapped it. Literally, I haven't even taken a photo of it and posted it on social media yet. But yeah.
Oh, that's amazing, man. Oh, those look awesome. I'm definitely gonna check out his stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll drop his info in the show link as well. I'd love to get him some traction.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah. So we'll kick off a formal introduction. Austin Hancock served 4 years in the United States Marine Corps. Austin deployed twice, one combat tour to Iraq as an anti-tank assault MOS, and on a joint overseas operation where he provided security for VIPs, the battalion commander and battalion sergeant major in theater. Austin served on joint operations with select special forces units in their AO area of operations. Today, Austin is the owner of a real estate asset investing company specializing in buy and holds, fix and flips, and development. Austin is also the owner of an education and consulting company, helping people to obtain financial freedom and self-development at a high level. And a quick shout out to Mike Ritlin, host of Mike Drop Podcast, where I heard Austin's story. That was an awesome episode, man. And I'm really excited to dig into all of that kind of professional, side of how you build your business.
Sure, heck yeah, dude. Mike's awesome. Yeah, that was a great interview. I love going out to Texas. It's not far from my hometown, Oklahoma, right? And so yeah, great spot.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Austin. So I want to do a life story. So we want to kick off with childhood, where you grew up, and what was childhood like for you?
Sure, man. So I was originally born in Wichita, Kansas, and then my dad got transferred. His job got transferred to Oklahoma when I was 8 years old, and so we moved to Oklahoma City. My dad was an engineer, so he's working for an energy sector company at the time, and then so I grew up in Oklahoma, right? I grew up middle class kid riding bicycles. I mean, I played baseball. We had a park in the neighborhood. I had buddies that rode bikes. We could ride our bike to 7-Eleven to get an icy. It was like almost like the 1990s, early 2000 version of Sandlot. Like we had a big green belt. We'd hit trees with sticks. We'd shoot each other with BB guns. I really have no qualms about how I grew up. You know, it was just middle class, good old Oklahoma, blue collar, lifestyle for the most part. So,
Sure.
that was I had a great growing up. I have a younger sister, and my parents are still together. I was fortunate that both my grandparents on my mother's side and my father's side, they were still together up until my grandfathers had passed, and so I have great examples of what it's like to keep a family together. Does that make sense? Oh, do we freeze for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does
We did, but it caught up.
Okay.
And yeah, and what you said definitely makes sense. Anything in childhood in particular kind of led you to service?
So going back to being a kid, shoot each other with BB guns and hanging out and paintballing and all that stuff, making guns out of sticks and things like that. Like I think from the very beginning, I always wanted to be in the military. I was the one that would go to the library. I'd get these books on like World War II. That's pretty much the only section I ever went to when I went to the library, whether it was at the school or whether it was literally the public library. I would check out all these books like Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, Vietnam, World War II. Like I was very, very intrigued in like the history of war from a very young age, dude. I was watching all the movies. I watched all the Arnold movies. I watched Rambo, First Blood. Like I still caught the tail end of the '80s, hardcore '80s, generation. I'm just old enough, and so I guess from a very early age, I was always very, very fascinated by the military and wanted to be a part of it in some capacity. I just didn't know what I didn't know and didn't know what route I was going to take.
Yeah. Did you have like influence around you, whether it was family or peers, like, kids in your class?
That's a good question. Honestly, no. So like my neither one of my parents were in the military. Both of my grandfathers were.
Hmm.
They were like, they weren't in for very long, 4 years, and they were very young. One was in the army as a tanker, and the other one was in the Air Force as a crew chief and mechanic. And so they weren't in very long. We're talking like right when they were young, probably early 20s themselves. Just a little short stint, got out of the military. But I wouldn't say that's what really inspired me. I don't know why. I didn't have anybody that was close to me that was in. I always was attracted and tried to find somebody that was, but I didn't ever find anybody that I think was at the level that I wanted. I wanted to meet somebody that was either a Marine or a special operator or something cool. But being in Oklahoma, nobody was really stationed there that was that, or anybody that I knew, not in my family or my realm that was. So I wasn't influenced by anybody specific, just other than kind of the things that we talked about, the books, the
Yeah.
movies, and then all of that. I don't know. It was just like ingrained into me. I don't know.
Yeah. No, yeah, I hear that. Yeah, that all makes sense. That all tracks. So what was kind of like the turning point? Like when did you enlist?
I enlisted in 2006. And so a little bit of backstory. Like I said, I grew up as a good childhood and everything. But about 16, 17 years old, a little testosterone started kicking in and a little bit of a rambunctious attitude. I wanted to test the limits of my conservative family. I grew up in a house with no alcohol. I grew up in a house where, you went to church on Sundays. And, I started to be a little bit more of a rebel. And I was like, maybe I need to test what my parents think they know. Maybe they don't know everything. I think it's kind of normal for any young man,
Yeah.
especially when you do grow up with having things so good that you don't know how it is, never needing for anything for the most part. We weren't rich by all means, but we sure weren't poor. Um, and so my point is, I started to test the limits, and get a little testosterone, and started drinking, started hiding that from my parents, telling my folks I was sleeping over at a friend's house, and the friend, had a much different lifestyle than myself, so his mom never tracked us where we went, what we did, and so that led me down a road of two felonies and two misdemeanors, where I had potentially a fork in the road where I was either going to go down to juvenile delinquent center because I got tried as a 17-year-old with those two felonies, two misdemeanors, or I was going to join the military. That wasn't really the option they proposed, but that's the situation that ended up unfolding. And so before I joined the military, it's funny because I was working summers for my dad, and I was working with one
Hmm.
of the guys, the head superintendents there, and I was partying on the weekends, doing my thing, getting in fights. I mean, it just kind of got worse and worse as you mix alcohol into young men and parties. And this is still a time and generation where you had field parties, you would have house parties. I mean, I feel like modern generations don't do so much, but we definitely did back then. And so I was getting in all sorts of trouble, and the problem started before I had actually even gotten arrested. I had gotten multiple other fights. I'd brought in some trouble back to my parents' house because I had caused problems, and then those people came and found out where I lived, and they'd vandalize my truck or they'd do things. That's a long story of all these little things that had happened. But the point is, I was going down this path, and I was trying to figure out what it was like to be a tough guy. I mean, if I really were to look back, my objective was probably just to test the limits of myself and prove something. I feel like that's how we are as young men, especially driven young men. I wanted to my parents know what they're talking about. I don't trust them. They don't know me. All these things as a young man, and really at that point, so I had these two felonies, two misdemeanors for getting in a fight and causing a bunch of mayhem and vandalism to a property. And I hadn't been charged, so I hadn't been convicted. I was just charged, so I didn't get convicted of these
Hmm.
crimes. And I was given an opportunity essentially while working with this gentleman that was kind of my mentor unintentionally in construction. And he was like, "Dude, you should just join the military." And I was like, "I've always wanted to, but I nobody's ever really said do it because my parents and the majority of their generation really wasn't advocating for military at the time because they grew up watching TV with Vietnam on, and so it's not like something my parents would want their son to go do. If that wasn't the first decision, you should join the army, you should join the Marine Corps, you should join the Navy, whatever. That wasn't my parents. My parents were like, you should go to college, you need to get a counselor, you're being rambunctious, you have an alcohol problem, we don't even know. Like that's the kind of the path that they were going, much more conservative, trying to bring me back down. Go to church more, it'll help you. Um, and because they'd never done any of these things, they'd never had been
Hmm.
trouble, they'd never been in like crazy fights, they'd never done all this stuff, and so to them it was very new, and they they were right in thinking this, but I was like, y'all are blowing this out of proportion. But they were right in thinking that I was headed down to a path that was going to lead me into, juvenile delinquent center and prison, and then it just continues. The system keeps eating. So I was fortunate that I was working with that guy, and that guy goes, man, just join the military. And he was like, my dad was in the Marines, and I would have joined the Marines, but I couldn't because he busted his jaw from riding bulls as a young man. So he had like a metal bar in his jaw, and he had some other stuff in his head from riding bulls. He's kind of a cowboy guy. And I was like, dude, okay, I'm gonna check that out because this is already when I was going through these trials, and I'm a senior in high school in 2005.
Mhm.
So I'm like, it's probably not a bad idea. And I've always wanted to join the military. It sounds like something that we'll see what see if it even happens now. I don't even know. And so what I do is I go and talk to a recruiter and kind of first the only recruiter I talk to. I don't go to a Marine, I don't go to an Army recruiter. I don't go to a Navy recruiter. I go straight to the Marine Corps recruiter, like he had suggested. He's like, "That's where you need to be, boy." I was like, "Okay." So I go there, and the recruiter's like, I told him my situation. Didn't even bat an eye at this time. He's like, "All right, well, let's see what we can do. Let me talk to your attorney." So I plug him in with my attorney. We start going through the process. They start chatting on the back end with me. I don't know what's happening. I'm 17. They ended up, he was like, "Are you serious? Let's get serious." So I start signing paperwork, and he's like, "Yes, we can do this." And long story short, my attorney, my recruiter, and the judge. Well, my attorney and recruiter went to the judge and basically made a bargain that if Austin joins the Marine Corps, that he didn't have to go down the path that I was getting ready to go down. Because trial takes a long time. For anybody that's never been in trouble, trial takes a little bit of time, right? You commit a crime, or you have a crime, or you're allegedly committed a crime. It takes months, maybe sometimes years before you're actually convicted and tried. And so throughout that process, my attorney and my recruiter were started working together and essentially proposing to the judge that I was going to do that because the judge was already the things were coming up every time I'd go to court. The story would unfold a little more. The story would unfold a little
Mhm.
more. So it was really starting to look like I was having to go down juvenile delinquent center road, which at the time was even still better than me being tried as an adult at 18, 19, because then I would have had to go to
Mhm.
general population county jail and then go to prison for a short term if that was their choice. And I was just 17, about to turn 18 as a senior. So I turned 18 after high school was over when I graduated in '05. Okay. So I said, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. Boom. They make it, they do it. I swear in front of the judge, essentially. I go off to MEPS. I do all the things. I'm doing everything that they say to do. I'm showing up on time. And yeah, I joined the Marine Corps. I ship off to boot camp, I want to say early 2006 or mid 2006. And then I'm off to MCRD, which is actually here in San Diego. And yeah, that's my beginning journey.
Yeah. So before jumping too far ahead, I guess for parents or even kids at that age, right? Parents who have kids, generally speaking, at that age, I think it's really relatable. For myself, even, what kind of advice would you give both a young adult, right, at that age point, and also a parent who has a young adult?
It's a good point. And me being a parent now, I have a little bit more perspective on that. I have two young
Hmm.
daughters, and I may end up having more kids. So my point is like, before I had kids, it was a little different, but now my perspective shifted because I have had kids. I have kids, and
Yeah.
I get the objective. I look back at my parents, and I'm like, as a parent, your job is to protect your children, right? You want to guide them along this road and this path to be successful. And even some of us parents that are a little bit more aggressive, one or two kids maybe to go through some of these trials and tribulations on a minor level so that they can develop and grow well. But
Hmm.
uh, you know, when when you go through some of those stuff, or when you, as a parent, you don't really need to kind of have an open mind about it and remember back when you were young and the things that you were going through, because unfortunately, when we're 16, 17, 18, and 19, we're not really fully developed, right? We're not really thinking straight. That's the reason insurance goes down after 25. I mean, let's be honest, right? So for parents, I mean, understand where your kids are coming from. The military may be a good choice. My parents, probably didn't think so. But what I was getting at a minute ago is kind of like, as a parent now, especially during 2006. Like let's go back and recap 2006, 2007, and when I was joining, we were going straight to war. Especially if I was going Marine Corps Infantry, which is what I was.
Hmm.
And so for my parents' preservation mode, their objective probably wouldn't be like, yeah, you should go to war, son, because they're more worried about losing me and getting killed in
Yeah.
combat. Then they're like, at least he's here. He's going to go through trial. He's going to get in trouble. So for parents out there, and for parents, you guys need to have a little bit more of an open mind. Maybe you could you could kind of guide them and talk to them into maybe an MOS that's not specific to combat. Maybe you could kind of guide them into an area that is a little bit more easy, but at the same time, in the same sentence, like that's what I needed. I needed the Marine Corps
Mhm.
infantry. I needed that guidance. I needed to hear it from somebody else. I needed to be recreated and reborn into the Marine Corps infantry, and I was. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I needed that. I needed those type of leaders because I didn't respect any other authority that wasn't like a man, like this
Yeah.
is the dude. This is the bee's knees. And then for youngsters out there, anybody looking to join the military right now, uh, my advice for you is the same advice that I got. This guy said, the guy that told me to go to the Marine Corps recruiter, he said this: don't ask anybody, don't tell anybody, just go. And that's
Yeah.
something that I've implemented in my life now because too many times what we'll do is we'll go ask our parents, we'll go ask our friend, we'll go ask our grandma or grandpa, or whoever it is that impacts our life that helps us make these decisions because we know we're a little bit of a knucklehead at the time. And the bad part is when we do that, what we're doing is we're asking for permission to go do it. And if somebody persuades you, they can persuade you and you'll regret it. And a lot of people that don't end up joining the military were persuaded by their parent or some other guiding person, and they end up regretting not joining. They do. I hear it all the
Mhm.
time. I wish I would have joined. I wish I would have joined. I wish I would have joined. I could have, should have, would have, right? And the reason that they didn't, and they'll tell you a lot of times is, well, because my dad said I had to go to college, because of this, that. My grandma would have been disappointed because she was about to die. All these things. And so if you
Yeah.
go and ask for permission from all these people that aren't you, then you'll never really fully own, going and doing it. And I think you should just go out and do it. You should not ask for permission. You should just go forward and attack it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I totally agree. All that tracks make sense. I want to kind of digress and ask you a separate question to the kind of topic that you just brought up of others who haven't served and bring up the I would have, should have, could have, um, whatever discussion topic, point, line, whatever you want to call that. How do you feel about that? Like, does that ever bug you when someone says that to you or near you?
For sure, 100%. It bothers me a little bit.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me if they're respectful about it. Like, man, I wish I would have joined. I should have done. It would have been the best thing for me, man. That's cool. You did it. Moved on. No big deal. Like, I have people that say that a lot. But what it bothers me is when they come up with some excuse where
Yeah.
they think it's justifiable, but I'm just like, you're just being a bitch. Like,
Yeah. You know what?
that you just chose not to do it and not be like, well, my grandma was gonna die in 7 years, and so I didn't really want to do it. Like, that's the kind of shit they'll come up with. They'll come up with anything. You know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
You know what ends up bugging me is yeah, I happen to know a lot of people who went through just crazy hardships. You would think that on paper this is a person who could never serve, would never serve, should never serve. Yet they went through service. Some of them didn't come out of it right. So whenever I hear someone throw that nonsense near me, I just get really upset for kind of the I don't know, disrespect it gives to those who went above and beyond. I mean, frankly, even your story, right? Like you were on the verge of a completely different path in life, and you chose to, fuck it, I'm gonna serve, and I'm gonna correct myself. So, I mean, that deserves respect, right? So, anytime I hear it, I mean, it really bugs me. It puts me off, man. So I just wanted to get your
No,
thoughts.
you're a really good point because it does. And when you go, this is the beauty of it. This is what I needed too that I don't think maybe gets talked about enough. But when you get dumped into a boot camp platoon or in a platoon in general, then you're dumped in there with people from all walks of life. And so that what I needed,
Mhm.
right? I came from middle class America. I came from riding my bike. And so I got to hang out with dudes that freaking were living in Compton and Oakland and Texas and blah, 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 like all these places. And so I got to see how everybody else grew up, and
Yeah,
so you kind of know that from high school, but you don't really get that close like you would in the Marine Corps. And like you said, there's people that come from nothing. There's people that have like
yeah,
first generation Americans that are doing their best. And like those dudes, like who became my freaking brothers, when you're going overseas and you're doing things, you don't even look at them different, nothing different. You don't give a shit. Everybody's green. And so when those kind of people go and do it, and then you hear freaking Johnny 2 Cents from your town makes up an excuse, you're just like, fuck off. It is annoying, bro.
yeah, yeah. So on the same page there. So kind of where we left off before I started asking a few questions, I want to kind of expand on that period of time when you went to your recruiter. They started talking with your attorneys, so on and so forth. What kind of occurred specifically? You starting your kind of enlistment journey.
So, I mean, I think I cold reached out to the recruiter. I mean, I
Hmm.
just directly reached out to the recruiter, and I'm very fortunate that I met a recruiter that was willing to go through some of this.
Sure.
And it was at a time where we were gearing up. I mean, George W. Bush was trying to do the whole push into Iraq, and so it was called the Surge at the time, and his objective was
Hmm.
to send like 100,000 extra troops overseas. And so the military was throwing waivers left and right for dudes that smoked pot, they had a hand tattoo, or whatever it was. And so I think this was part of it. Now there wasn't like a specific scenario where like this is part of it, but like it was the time. And
Yeah.
that's what the government does. They open up the funnels, they just lower the regulations to let everybody in, and they start qualifying. Um, and so yeah, yeah. So I'm talking to the recruiter, and so figure out that process. If everybody's watching this has never joined the military, essentially you talk to the recruiter, you start talking about things. One thing that's super important, I know for it's important in the Marine Corps, but it's also important in other branches, maybe even more so important, is making sure that you know what kind of MOS you're going to get, what job skill you're going to do.
Yeah.
Because if you go open contract, like I had buddies that I went to boot camp with, and I knew what I was going to be. And then they're like, I want to open contract, and my recruiter told me to because he needed to fill a billet, and now the dude that you would be your bro in the infantry gets a fucking chef's job and hates his 4 years of his life until he can lap move for
Yeah.
2 years, you know? And so you guys
Yeah.
don't really want to go open contract unless you really do not care what kind of job you get.
Yeah. I'll double down on that, especially now with access to information. I mean, come on, you got to just do a few Google searches and to figure out what seems intriguing, interesting to you, and go into the recruiter with that headspace.
100%.
Yeah. So, all right. So it sounds like you engage with the recruiter, and I kind of want you to hash out this process because I think that there's a lot of people who are probably in a similar scenario, right? Going through potential litigation, lawsuit, whatever it is, and think that they don't have the opportunity. So I want you to squash that kind of thought process and hash out. All right, you met up with the recruiter. What happens next?
I mean, I was all in. So I think that it goes back to kind of what I said a second ago too. It's like lock into this. Like if you're gonna do it, you're
Yeah.
gonna commit, and you're way. This is kind of how I run my life now too. So for like, if you saying you want to do something, basically don't pussyfoot around about it. Like let's go.
Yeah.
Like if you're ready to go and talk to the recruiter, maybe get a little information at the beginning. But the second time you start having a conversation, the second time he picks you up for lunch, the second time you go do things, like you need to have a decision made. It's important to start like your life by making these commitments and decisions, whether they're the best for you, or there was another one. But this is the one you're going to make now, and then you're going to make the best of it. And so,
Yeah.
so when you have that process, commit to it. I see a lot of times with young people, they talk to the recruiter, then they ghost the recruiter, and they talk to the recruiter, then they ghost the recruiter. And don't get me wrong, their job is to get you in, right? They're the sales arm of the military, essentially, to recruit you and bring
Hmm.
you in. But you have to ask yourself, why are you not willing to commit? Like, what is going on? And if it's not for you, then it's not for you. I never hack anybody for that at all, right? I have my own children; they'll make their own decisions, and I'll have my own input on what way they should go, but they can ultimately make the decision. But the same for you guys, right? And so the
Yeah.
process of that is talking to your recruiter, being clear with them, answering the phone, communicating, being respectful to them, and then just if you don't want to do what you're talking about with them, then just say you don't want to do it and be honest. Or if you do, then freaking commit. Don't worry about what your friends are going to do and lock in.
Yeah. That's a great point in terms of finding out what your why is and, moving forward with process and you'll talk about in a moment. I mean, if you go into service with no why, especially if you're doing infantry or anything that's like physically demanding, which naturally is also psychologically demanding, and you don't have a why, I mean, you're asking, for an excuse essentially to fail, to quit.
100%.
And that, to your point also that you go into things today with that same kind of a mindset, it's applicable to all walks of life, no matter what you're doing. So it's a great point, and
Yeah,
a plug for what you'll talk about later in terms of translatable skills.
for sure.
But for now, in terms of chronological or continuing your story, so you get to, I guess the next step is you're going to boot camp.
Yep, yep. So boom, I'm in boot camp, or I ship off to boot camp right after I do the MEPS thing.
Hmm.
And for anybody that doesn't know that process, essentially you're going from like the VA, your local VA area, or a hotel that they put you in before you leave. The bus picks you up, they take you to the airport, you get on a plane, you show up with your papers, your orders to boot camp. There's a receiving drill instructor. They're not really like a green belt or a drill instructor or anything in the Marine Corps. They're just like a receiving instructor.
Hmm.
They bring you on, they yell at you a little bit, but it's not like crazy. They tell you to get on the bus. You get on the bus, and then usually a lot of times they're picking you up in the evening, like late night, like man around 10 o'clock, because a lot of people's flights come in, so you just wait in the airport
Hmm.
until everybody's flight comes in. They pick everybody up. So they pick you up, boom, you go, you take the little white bus over to MCRD. If you're on the West Coast, if you're on the East Coast, you're going to Paris Island. Um, and then the onboarding phases start. So you technically Marine Corps boot camp is 13 weeks long, but that first week is called receiving. And what
Hmm.
you're doing is you're doing your paperwork, you're doing your your medical stuff, you're logging in and making sure that everything's correct, your social security, you're making sure that you have everything you need, and then they're allotting time in between, a little bit of a grace period for you to pick up and start with a platoon, right? For everybody else to
Hmm.
come in. Some people come in on let's say on a Wednesday, some people come in on a Monday, and so they're waiting for everybody to pile up. They get everybody in there, then boom, that's your platoon, and then you hit the ground running. And what the Marine Corps calls Black Friday, which is the day that you get introduced to your drill instructors, and they present themselves to you. You get your new house with them, so you're living a month in MCRD here in San Diego, right by the airport. Then you go up north, which is at Camp Pendleton, for another month. Then you turn around and you come back the last phase, the third phase of boot camp for at MCRD. And so that's
Yeah.
kind of that evolution of it. But in
Did
a
you
nutshell.
did you do anything to prepare for MEPS or prepare generally speaking?
No, I didn't. I was a physically fit kid, so I was already
Okay.
like lifting weights. I had wrestled in high school and ran track,
Yeah.
cross country. I had actually stopped all of those senior year to one when I was partying, lifting weights, and just being a knucklehead. So I had kind of quit all the sports, and of course that's when things started to get worse for me.
Yeah.
But no. I actually ended up getting meritorious PFC during boot camp for having the first class PFT physical fitness score in my platoon.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
yeah, that's just like
By
a
the way,
nutshell.
yeah, awesome. Interesting correlation though, because you said, right when you stopped sports, whatever fitness, generally speaking, that's when you started, getting into trouble. I mean, does that actually align?
So somewhat, I was locked into like being more. I wanted to gain muscle. I was smaller because I'd
Yeah.
wrestled,
Okay.
right? I'd cut weight for so long, a lot in my life. I was cross country, so I was very, very active. Played baseball even in middle school and stuff. And so I had like, this vision, right? It goes back to this vision of young men seeing like Arnold and seeing Sylvester Stallone and all
Yeah.
these guys, these heroes at the time. And and I was like, I want to get bigger, I want to get jacked. And so I started lifting weights. But I think that probably, I don't think that correlates with quitting the sports, but it kind of
Mhm.
my attitude is probably where more so shifted.
Okay, I got you. But yeah, anyways, fair enough with the lifting. I mean, that's any 17-year-old kid could understand that headspace.
Yes. I mean, I've weighed like, so just so you guys have a reference, when I graduated high school, I probably weighed like a buck 40. I went to the Marine Corps like a buck 45, so 145 pounds. And I don't know what height that was at the time, but I would be willing to guess I'm like 5'6" at the time.
Mhm.
I'm 5'8" now, so I'm sure I grew a little bit, but not a crazy amount.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So then going through, actually, before I even
I mean,
ask, kind of like
18
go
years
go
old,
ahead.
so everybody knows like what timeline that
Yeah.
is. I was 17 when I got in trouble, 18 years old by the time I shipped off.
Yeah. Cool. So I was about to ask a boot camp question, but before that, you know, the moment that you understood you're good to go with Marines, what was that feeling like? Considering again, you had kind of this lawsuit lingering over your head.
I was excited, man. Excited, but just scared. I mean, scared and nervous too, because I mean, my parents had kind of unintentionally. I don't think that they weren't like hell and damnation, but they put some realistic perspectives in it from
Mm.
parenting, and they were like, you're gonna go to war, and of course, me, honestly, like my recruiter told me, he's like, yeah, you may not go, bro. You may not even go, and I'm like, my parents like, no, you're gonna go to war. And I'm like, nah, my recruiter says I may not go. He's helping me out, getting out of this trouble. So and my parents were sure as shit right? So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I was like,
I
no,
mean,
I won't go. I wasn't worried about war. I'm just gonna go to boot camp and do my thing. Yeah.
that's a crazy headspace to be in, like getting literally opposite, opinions on what you're about to do. Those opposites are extreme opposites, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
that's wild, man. So
Yeah.
so in boot camp, like just generally speaking, what are some things that I don't know stood out, or like memories of it?
I got some good stories. So like for Black Friday when we pick up with our drill instructors, their objective at that point, that day, just like the Marine Corps especially, the government, but definitely the Marine Corps especially, is really good at doing their job at creating young men into Marines. And the
Hmm.
way they do that is through they don't have to beat you up anymore like Vietnam or punch you or do things like that. But what their objective is to do is to cause as much chaos, mayhem, and stress mentally and physically through like physical output and working out through that time period. But it's all psychological, right? And so so their objective is to psychologically wreck you so that you can be prepared for things that may be more psychologically difficult in the future. I think the majority of in a minute we'll talk about it, but my successes and most people giving up or their failures, which is kind of what you were talking about a minute ago, they come from it all starts here, right? We all hear about
Hmm.
mindset and things like that, and the Marine Corps specifically knows that, and they do a good job at breaking you down. And so, boom, Black Friday, their objective is to be like, I mean, they are crisp, they are on point. Every drill instructor, everything is perfect. They make no mistakes. They are perfect. They want you to think they're perfect. They don't shit. They don't sleep. They don't do anything. Their teeth are always brushed. I mean, they are on point. They don't ever sleep or make any mistakes. And that's the objective. Is like you can't. These guys are machines. They're
Hmm.
robots. And the Marine Corps does a good job at creating those drill instructors to do so and to be perceived that way. And so when you
Yeah.
get picked up on Black Friday, boom, all chaos breaks loose, and they're just yelling at you, throwing stuff. Your foot lockers are all over the place. The only piece of personal equipment that you have is like your camis, maybe a personal money valuable bag, which is your ID and a few bucks you had in it from travel, maybe a ring or something. Think of it that way, like whatever you got. And that's in a bag. That's the only thing you kind of get saved. It's hung up somewhere, and then boom, everything else is just thrown out. And the objective is to really kind of detach you from physical things, from materialistic objects, even your clothes. Even what do you think they call you recruit because you're not a Marine and you don't have a name and you don't have any hair, so you literally have nothing. The objective is to break you down to where you have absolutely nothing, so that they can build you back up into the machine they want you to be, and a good thinking machine. So
Yeah.
boom, Black Friday hits. Our whole squad bay is what we call it is getting thrashed. People's clothes is everywhere. I mean, I remember like take your boots off, put your boots back on, take your boots, throw them in the middle, kick your boots around, and then now you got one fucking guy with a size 9, a size 12. This guy's wearing this guy's camis, this guy's doing that. Just all crazy. And their objective is that. So there was a point in that day and that doesn't really stop throughout first phase. First phase is
Hmm.
really like it's off and on. It's not as much as Black Friday, but it's off and on. Probably at least a couple times a week you get thrashed. Um, and so we're carrying our foot lockers. These foot lockers are like basically everything you own is in this foot locker. It's got your soaps, your hygiene bag, your flip flop, every single thing that you own. We're carrying these in and out of the squad bay because they're like, oh, do this wrong, pick them all up, go outside. Pick them all up, go back inside. Pick them up, go back outside. Like this is just going on for an hour. Well, we're outside getting ready to go back inside, and the Marine Corps boot camp barracks is 3 stories tall, and everybody in our whole platoon is in this one barracks, right? So all the way up, and then there's 4 actual platoons on each level. And so at the very top level, this recruit, they're all getting thrashed too. This is happening to every one of us in this whole platoon, the whole battalion. And then boom, this guy flies out of the freaking 3rd story window and tries to commit suicide. I'm assuming he's trying to commit suicide, but he jumped head first
Yeah.
out of the freaking window, uh, and then hits the ground like within 10, 15 feet from me. And I'm carrying my footlocker at like 18 years old, looking over, looking at the drill instructor, and the drill instructor, I just remember the drill instructor looking at us and like, good, I hope he dies. This is what you guys get, you dumb fucks. Like, just losing his mind. And I'm like, oh my God, he's not going to help this guy out. And I'm like, they don't care if we die. And so, anyways, he fell for a foreman up. The guy wasn't like, didn't break his neck or anything. He just like hit the ground. But I was just, that was kind of for literally the first day of pickup.
Man, that is crazy. Did you guys just like continue as if that person just didn't happen?
So they called the corpsman. The corpsman raced over there. They started checking him out. They made us go inside. We had to face the other way and then look
Okay, yeah.
away, like just trying to distract us. Essentially, everybody faced that way. We had to wait there for like an hour, facing the other way. And then they had to whatever happened to him, we never knew. And then they went back to
Right.
the normal day.
Oh man, that is crazy.
Yeah.
So anything else come to mind from boot camp
Um,
overall?
Man, but it was funny. There was times like that they're screwing with you, and then there's times where you feel really alone. You get sick. When you get sick, you're a little bit weak. weak mentally, not just
Yeah.
physically.
Yeah.
Get a little emotional, and so there's times like when I got sick, and what happens is when you mix that many cultures and groups to people together from all into one spot, you're gonna get sick. Everybody's carrying some other bug or something, so you get a little bit of like a head cold, a bug, and so I mean, that was times where I was like, and I didn't get a phone call. A lot of people are like, you gotta go to boot camp, and then you gotta call your parents and tell them you're there. I think I got skipped over from that. Just looking back at like the receiving day, because I got skipped over from that because I went to boot camp with a shaved head. Like I shaved my head through high school, like
Yeah.
this, and
Mhm.
so this is nothing new to me. And so I went to boot camp with this, and so they're like, you don't need a haircut, go that way. And so when I did go down the hall, I think I skipped the phone call time where it's like, Mom, I'm at boot camp, I'm safe, okay, bye, and like that's what you're supposed to get, and I didn't get one of those, and so I remember like being kind of upset that I literally was in Oklahoma, told my parents bye when they dropped me off at the hotel, and then the next time I was in receiving and stuff, and they put my phone up, like my phone was locked up. So it's like I went to jail anyway.
Yeah. It sounds like
So
it. Yeah.
that
So
was a scenario, and then another scenario. There was many times like people fight, like you're gonna get in fights, right? Like everybody's got an ego, personality coming from one someplace to the other. The beauty about it, though, that I really like looking back upon it, though, is like nobody's clicked up, right? Nobody's clicked up yet
yeah.
because everybody's from different walks of life. Not
Mhm.
you don't have a guy with 10 buddies over here that'll beat your ass because nobody knows each other yet. So
Yeah.
everybody is solo, which is kind of nice when it comes to like getting in an argument with somebody at the beginning, because then it's like, it's mano y mano. It's not like you against this whole crew that's going to beat your ass at night or something, right? And so
Totally.
that's nice. And then the objective is to build you guys up together to where you hate the drill
Mhm.
instructors. But there were definitely fights, fist fights, flip flop. People get smacked in the face at night with flip flops for snoring. The IP scissors, they're like little bitty scissors that cut like little pieces of cloth off your clothes for dress uniforms. They're called IPs. And then they're really short scissors like this. And I remember one kid got stabbed with those from another guy, from another recruit. Um, I saw two platoons get in a fight. Like they went at each other because the drill instructors will egg on our platoon's better than their platoon. Their platoon's the problem, just for camaraderie of us versus them, right? Like my platoon was
Mhm.
3077, 3078. They'd be like, that's the nastiest platoon. They're the worst. They're the ones that are going to make the battalion look so bad on boot camp and graduation day. And so we'd be like, fuck them. And you'd get like team camaraderie. Like that's their objective. And so sometimes, like
Yeah.
when the drill instructors would sleep, these platoons will like go at it. Like you'll start scrapping. So that's something I remember. Um, just funny stuff like
Is
that. I remember a
yeah.
really funny story where I'm a drill instructor, and this is a good one. So there was a guy that was happened to be from freaking Oklahoma that was a recruit. All right, I'm from Oklahoma too, but once I found out I wasn't telling anybody where I was from. I was gonna be the gray man. I was gonna be the guy that's quiet. I don't want to be, I don't want people to know where I'm from. I don't really want them to know my name. I'm just chilling. I'm just in boot camp. That's how I was told before I got in. I was like, smart move. And anyways, this guy's name's Corns. His last name's Corns. And Corns, this poor guy has fucking buck teeth, like these big buck teeth. Like just everybody's shaped different. Everybody's got these different things, right? Like it's unfortunate. Some people have things that they can fix later, but it is what it is. We got genetics. So he's got these big buck teeth, and the drill instructors love to pick people apart. They love to like whatever it is, whatever you're insecure about, you're gonna get smashed for that, right? No matter what, right? And so the Corns had these buck teeth, and he'd be yelling, and he'd be like, "Aye, sir," his buck teeth. I remember one night the drill instructor was getting ready to turn the lights off, and we had a little extra time, and he's like, "I'm not turning the lights off until Corns puts his teeth in his face and shuts his mouth." And I was like, "Oh my god, that's fucking horrible. Like that's really bad.
Yeah. That's
Like that's
tough. That's
funny, but it's
tough.
bad." And and that's how much they fuck with you, right? Like it's straight hazing all the time. And and Corey's like, "All right, sir," like trying to put his fucking teeth in his mouth. Like, "All right, sir." He's like, "What's your fucking teeth in your mouth?" Like yelling at him across the freaking squad bay. And then he like gets on his rack. Like you see the drill instructor walk boom, 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 across the squad bay, jumps on this rack, like, "Took your fucking teeth in your fucking head." And he's like, "Aye, sir." And we're all like laying there, like getting ready to go to bed, like. So that,
It's
that was
yeah.
really, I can't forget.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you could understand kind of the perspective of being in boot camp and thinking about that situation, you can't help but laugh. I mean, it's just it's a hilarious kind of
It's hilarious, man. You have to laugh.
yeah. Exactly, exactly. Was there anything before we close out boot camp? Was there anything like in particular that stands out in terms of difficulty? If it was a trek, if it was a whatever.
Yeah, so the Marine Corps, you have the Crucible, right? That's their little like 3 day hell week
Hmm.
essentially, and I wouldn't say it was hard. It was what we want. I was there to test myself, so I enjoyed some of that.
Yeah,
And so I say I enjoyed it. Like I didn't enjoy it, but I was proud that I was going through it. Let's put it that way.
yeah, yeah.
It wasn't necessarily hard. It was just tiring, right? Like so, you only get 3 meals for 3 days. They're really basically MRE meals, and you pretty much only have one meal. Like it's literally like a whatever MRE you have, the whole thing. It's
Hmm.
not like you get a whole ton of calories, but 3 meals. Then you only get like 3 hours of sleep a night if you don't have fire watch, and, and you're exercising or you're humping a pack or you're going up the hills the entire time, or you're going through drills. You're pretending to get out of like these LAVs and doing all this land dismount stuff. And the only thing I mean, it's super hard in the fact that you're fatigued, you're
Hmm.
exhausted, right? I've never been that tired before in my life, except for any other time in the Marine Corps. I feel like even in the, when you go out and do deployments and shit. And so I was just like, we were all in a line. It's called humping. We're all on humping a pack, and we're all moving from one location to another. And I just remember falling asleep walking. Like
Yeah,
I was like, oh my god, like I'm pretty sure I just fell asleep, like for maybe it was a split second, it could have been 2 seconds,
yeah,
3 seconds, I don't even know, but I remember being like, oh whoa, like I'm that delusionally tired. Your operational skills are all bad, and that was kind of unique. That was pretty hard. And then, but what happens is like towards the end of that Crucible, that third day, you get all motivated and jacked up because that's when they give you the Marine Corps Eagle Globe and Anchor at the top of the hill. And so
hmm,
like it's crazy to see like the adrenaline kick in and like forego all of the tired and exhaustionness just for the motivation of what's going to happen in that stint. Um,
totally.
and so that was unique. That was cool.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting, what you just pointed out in particular, is something that most any infantry veteran would understand. That's for sure. I think veterans in general probably understand this. Is you get to that point of like utter exhaustion where you're just going to literally fall asleep standing up, and then some circumstance, whether it's you're finishing whatever situation you're going through, to your point right now, right? You're about to get the your pins, and all of a sudden that adrenaline kicks in, and then you're like a new person. It's like nothing ever happened, right?
It's
So
wild how the human body
it's
works, huh?
wild. Exactly, yeah, it's wild. Yeah. So I feel understanding that kind of um, human ability, allows you to kind of tap into that in some degree on a day to day basis.
Good point. Very good point. You're right. You're exactly right. And it does kind of make you think of, like I said, I'm kind of a war history buff in general. It makes you think of a lot of the old, books
Mm-hmm.
that you'll read or specific scenarios of war, or
Mm-hmm.
these battles that people have had, and you're like, how did they do that? They had a 30-day battle, or they're this and that, and you're like, man, that's kind of like what they're trying to do. That's the reason that they're putting you
Yeah,
through this is to think that way.
exactly,
So your body and your
exactly.
mind can do a lot more than you think you can, and that is the one thing that the military, especially infantry, will teach you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you finish boot camp. What happens next?
So I finished boot camp. You get 10 days off. Essentially, everybody goes home to their families. You get 10 days leave, and then then the objective is to check back in whether you're an infantry guy, you go to School of Infantry, and whether if you're not infantry, then you go to MCT. And then
Mm-hmm.
MCT is like a basic shorter. It's like a month-long infantry school, and then you go from there to your duty to your schooling. So if you're an artillery guy, you go to MCT for a month, and then you go to RD school after that, right? Their objective is to give you some basic infantry skills, regardless of if you're going to be a mechanic, regardless if you're going to be a chef or an RD guy or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
so I go infantry, so I go straight from 10 days at home. I fly back to California. SOI is here at Camp Pendleton, School of Infantry, and I start my training there. And so School of Infantry is roughly around 2.5 months, 2 months if I remember correctly. And you get weekends off. You're given a little bit more liberty. Not every weekend, but like I would say majority of the weekends are off unless you get them secured
Mm-hmm.
for some dumb reason. And that's fun. That's honestly where I found my love for San Diego and was like, dude, this is awesome. It's a surfer place. The weather is amazing. Like I really
Yeah.
fell in love with San Diego because me and my boys that I was in School of Infantry with would have like the weekend off Saturday and Sunday. We'd go tear it up on the beach and get loaded.
Yeah. 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 It makes sense, man. Easy to understand. So you go through infantry school. if anything stands out from that process, let's hear it. If not, what's next?
Things that stand out. It's cool. I mean, it's awesome. It's where you get to do all the fun things, honestly,
Yeah.
that you're doing as an infantryman. It's like because they're gonna teach you how to shoot every weapon system that you got for the most part. You're gonna walk through all. It's what like we think of, I think, or at least I thought of when I was like, I'm gonna learn this stuff about
Yeah.
guns and machine guns and grenade launchers and AT4s and all these things, and that's where you learn it because it's no
Hmm.
longer about yelling at you for these stupid little things or you can do nothing wrong. They're literally like, okay, now it's time to teach you. So that's like the real school. Like you're like, oh, okay, here's the time to learn how this weapon system works. What's a thermite grenade? What's a frag grenade? What's a smoke grenade? What's a pin flare? What do all these things do? What's a machine gun? What types of machine guns? What's our arsenal look like today? And so that's where I think most people think that like boot camp looks like, but the
Hmm.
reality is it's school of infantry or it's infantry school. So that's cool. I love that part of it. And land
Yeah.
navigation, land nav's really fun. You do a single land nav exercise for about 48 or 24 hours. And so you better be pretty good at that. You use just a compass and a map. Um, I liked all that. So
Hmm.
nothing special, spectacular. I check out. So actually, when I joined the Marine Corps, I joined as a reservist. So when you're a reservist, you go back home and check into your duty station, which is 1 week or 1 weekend,
Hmm.
1 weekend a month, and then 2 weeks of summer. And so my thought was like, dude, I'm gonna go back to school. My parents honestly kind of talked me into that, as we can kind of go back and talk about the story. Like they were the ones that were like, hey, Dad, you should go reserve. And the reason that you should go reserve is because at least if you don't like it, that's what they were thinking. At least if you know X, Y, and Z, you can easily go to college and you can do these things. And you can still work and make money. And so they were kind of selling me on it. And they were like, if you want to go active duty, Austin, you could always go active duty from reserve, but at least you didn't go active duty first. Well, is it a regret of mine that I didn't go active duty? I don't know. I didn't do it. At the time when I got out and stuff, I probably was thankful I didn't. But there was times that at that point in my life that I wished I would have. So it is what it is. Because what happened to me was essentially I went back home after school of infantry, and I checked into my duty station, and then within a couple of months, I turned around and got deployed to Iraq anyway. So it's here nor there, right?
Yeah.
And then I didn't really go directly to Iraq. So what we do as a reservist is our whole battalion gets together, we start mobilizing. We end up going to one of these bigger bases, Lejeune or Pendleton, and
Hmm.
we start training. We start doing all these things, spinning everyone up, getting everyone together, getting all of the stuff coordinated and organized. And so we did that for a couple of months before we
Hmm.
even deployed to Iraq in 2007.
So that timeline was you finish infantry school, you went home for a minute, and then you get into training up for your deployment.
Yeah, yeah, it was roughly around, if I remember, I was like 3 or 4 months before we
Hmm.
got word that we're getting deployed, and then once we did, it was easily 30 days before they organized us, and we got our orders, and I was bouncing out of there, and I remember this, I didn't even have a chance to really go, I didn't go to college or anything in between that time. I just started working, and then boom.
Right. I mean, that's no time, right? You couldn't have done any schooling anyways.
Yeah.
So when you get to, I guess, your work up for deployment, how is that in comparison to infantry school?
Oh yeah, yeah. So working for deployment was cool because now I'm with the guys I'm going to deploy with. Now I'm
Hmm.
with what I don't know at the time, but I kind of know is the people that I'm really going to be brothers with for the longest period of time. Because the majority of the time, you have your friends from boot camp and all these things, but you really cultivate these deep, deep, hearted and loving relationships when you go to combat with somebody.
Hmm.
And so, and sometimes people do it multiple combat deployments, right? Some Marines go 3, 4, 8 combat deployments, and Army guys. And so but so I started connecting with these guys. It felt more like, I mean, that's pretty much active duty. I mean, I was activated. I was active duty the whole entire time at that point. And I mean, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed all of that. I enjoyed having a job to train for and to go
Hmm.
do because we knew we were going to deploy. There's an actual reason that we have to do these things. There's an actual reason to go train. There's
Yeah.
a reason to make sure that we have to go to this one class because the rules of engagement changed overseas, so we better go to this class. I remember one thing that was huge in 2007 is that everybody was getting blasted in '06 and '05 with IEDs. And so now we had to go through all these IED training
Hmm.
scenarios because the combat zone was changing so fast that they were putting us through those. And so a lot of the mobilization was based on what we're actually doing in theater, where we were was Iraq and Haditha, Iraq. And so, yeah, we spun up for about a couple months, and then we turned around and rotated out to Haditha, Iraq in 2007. And we ripped another infantry company, meaning we relieved them, and we took over the AO, and we were running basically the northern Al Anbar province. The unique thing is, I was an anti-tank assaultman, as you kind of mentioned at the beginning, and
Hmm.
there was no tanks to blow up in 2007. So we were tow gunners and javelin,
Hmm.
and then it's still infantry people. But there's no tanks. And so when we got deployed, they're like, what do we do with these tow gunners? Well, they turned our tow platoon into personal security detail for the battalion commander, battalion sergeant major. And so what we did is we literally were like his chauffeurs and his VIP security. So when you have he wanted to go see the line company over in this area, he wanted to go see the weapons company in this area, he wants to go see this area, you got to go talk to a dock at Biop, which is Baghdad International Airport. Whatever he needed, we were there, and we had to be on call pretty much 24/7, and it was good. It was good
Yeah.
because we didn't have to stand security like overnight watches. We didn't have to burn a lot of shit, and even though I ended up having to do that when I got in trouble, but it like wasn't one of our duties. None of us had to serve in the chow hall, and do like these basic duties that you would rotate people in and out of your platoon on,
Hmm.
because he needed all of us there all the time, anytime. And so that was cool. That was cool about that. But the other side was like, we always had to have clean shaven faces. We always had to have all of our gear had to be squared away. Our vehicles still needed to be clean because we're showing up, setting the presence from the battalion commander's perspective.
Right.
And it was very important. And we would have a lot of people come in that were like from the army or from a foreign country or dignitaries, or we'd go meet sheikhs. And so we were kind of the forward-facing representation of our battalion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a pretty cool role to be in for the pros, that you mentioned. Obviously, there's going to be cons with anything you do. So, yeah, I think that's a cool position to have had. The platoon you're with, was that the same platoon you went through infantry school with?
No, no. So when you have
Mm.
what happened after infantry school kind of what happened after boot camp. I split off, boom, go back
Okay.
home to Oklahoma as a reservist, and then they some of the guys in the infantry school that were tow gunners that graduated as tow gunners, they immediately go off to the
Mm.
fleet. And so those guys, the guys that I graduated school of infantry with that were tow gunners in my class, they went to 29 Palms, and they actually ended up deploying like a few months before me.
Okay. Yeah. So you end up integrating with your platoon anyways on the workup, correct?
Yeah, I integrate with the Oklahoma with going when I go to Oklahoma,
Mm.
I went attached, and then we all. So the way reserve works is that like you have subsidiaries, so you have like specialties, right? Like you have tow gunners in one area, you have infantry guys in one area, and then I'm talking about across the United States. Then you
Mm.
have weapons company in one area, and so we deployed with dudes from Louisiana, like the weapons company was from Louisiana, and everybody once they get activated, they all come together and create a full platoon or a full battalion.
Mm.
Like
Cool.
that's
Yeah. Okay.
Fourth Marine Corps Division. Yep.
Cool. So this deployment, anything like in particular stand out?
So I did a lot of VIP stuff, like I said a second ago. I really enjoyed that. It was fun doing my job. One of the biggest things is there was a huge transition period in Iraq where the standard operating procedures were dialing back. Right? It was
Hmm.
when we first got there. It was pin flares, get out of your car, aiming weapons at people, pulling them out of their vehicle. They had to pull their vehicle to the side and get out. Like we were pretty aggressive. That's kind of how were brought into the AO. And then we had to start dialing it off because we were trying to win more hearts and minds. We were trying to give more to the Iraqi police, the Iraqi army. We really wanted them to take control, and I think we were slowly starting to pull out back from the war. We lived in the middle of the city of Haditha in an old schoolhouse, and we're the ones that transitioned from outside of that schoolhouse to outside of the city, just like right outside. We made our own little combat outpost, and the CBs did, and we started living in that. And that's just the objective of the war was changing and dialing down, and I think we were pulling back a little bit. So that was unique. And then we had multiple times where we had VIPs and dignitaries come in, but one distinctively was when we had the four-star general of the Marine Corps come in. We did security for him, and I mean security. I mean like we're right there next to his security, so that was really cool because I'm
Hmm.
like 19 years old carrying a machine gun next to like high command. It's really cool. And then I have another situation where Senator McCain was coming in for his political campaign, essentially, while he was going through the presidential. Um, he was like running for president,
Hmm.
and so I have pictures of him and I. shaking hands in a soccer field with a helo in the background with a machine gun on my lap at 19 years old. So that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, you gotta get that framed up behind you.
No, I need to get that.
Awesome. Yeah. So I didn't know if sorry, I didn't know if I cut you off, but I had to highlight that picture, that image. I don't know if you're finishing with something in that deployment.
So I mean that those were some great spots. We did some joint operations with special forces. You know, you can
Hmm.
have two different battalion commanders. You can have one that kind of wants to lay back and kind of wants to just like anybody else, right? Personalities of bosses, and or you want somebody that's gun ho. We wanted
Hmm.
somebody that's gun ho. We're like infantry dudes. We're ready to roll. We don't want to sit back and do nothing. And so ours was very gun ho. He actually ended up just getting out of the Marine Corps last year and as a 3-star general. So he's a very gun
Wow.
ho guy. He stayed in.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's super badass. He was Lieutenant Colonel Bellin at the time, and now he's 3-star General Bellin. But
That's awesome.
he was gun ho. He was a great guy. He was a phenomenal leader. I think he owned a law practice at home before he as a reservist Marine back when he was just an officer.
Crazy.
So he's
Hmm.
a very driven person. And so we got to do cool operations. So if like special operations were going to do anything in our area of operations, he was like, "Yeah, we're going to be there too. Yeah, we're going to be there too." And so I was kind of cool
Nice.
because they're like, "Oh God, we got these Marine Corps grunt infantry dudes. They're going to tag along to our, operation." But he's like, "It's my AO, dude. You're going to leave. You're going to bring us with you, or you're not going to have it." And so we did.
Yeah.
We did
No.
all these operations.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Um, so how does that deployment conclude?
So fortunately, with our platoon specifically, nobody got killed. We didn't have any crazy situations where vehicles were just obliterated and people were turned into pink mist, thank God. But
Hmm.
there was times that people did get like, hit with an IED, but it didn't do anything, or was it a kind of a light one? There were times where we got pop shots. I feel like we got pop shots all the time, but it was like
Hmm.
hit and runs, just little hit and runs. You can't even determine where it's coming from, and you're like, oh shit, okay, you're ready, you're excited, something's gonna happen, and then it's just nothing, and like they're all gone in
Yeah.
90. That was kind of the era of the war too, in 2007, 2008. And while that was dialing down and we're pulling out, they weren't being too aggressive like they were in '04 and '05, because they're like, oh, okay, they're dialing it down and moving
Hmm.
out. But that's when kind of like if you look at the trajectory of the wars, a lot of the guys that I deployed with ended up deploying again later to Afghanistan, and Afghanistan kicked off hard in like 2010 and 2011 and shit.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but we're very fortunate that we didn't have any, KIAs. There was many situations. We ended up having to. One of the platoons ended up having to eliminate a few people that were coming into the wire, but it wasn't like a super combative situation. It was super easy. So just stuff like that. But the thing I want to touch on that's important, and that I still think is strange, but I still struggled with, was you're on such high alert for so long,
Hmm.
you're so high strung. You're so ready for action. You have all these, these processes and procedures in place. You're ready to roll. I'm walking around at 19 years old with a belt-fed machine gun in my lap, throwing adults out of their cars, not throwing them, but like, hey, commanding them to do this, commanding them to do that. And so you're very stressed out, but you don't really think you're
Yeah.
stressed out. You're like, this is part of the job. This is what it's like being a Marine, and it is,
Yep.
and it is. But you come home, and a lot of people, including myself, we still struggle. Oh, my connection may be bad. All right, we're
Gotcha.
back.
Yeah. There's a little bit of lag. You're just saying you got home, including yourself.
Yeah, yeah. So when I got home, I struggled with that intensity and bringing it
Yeah.
back. It's hard to connect with your buddies from school that I was talking about before. The guys I was
Yeah.
kicking it with, in high school and then a little bit after. It's like I didn't have a lot in common with them anymore. My whole life had changed, and I didn't even realize it. And so
Hmm.
there's an air of stress, and I want to call, I guess you'd call it PTSD. It wasn't necessarily directed to like, I think PTSD, people get associate that with like, oh, my buddy's head got blown off right next to me, or my vehicle blew up and I saved 4 people, like, and that's not always the case. Sometimes
Hmm.
you can come home with a lot of stress, post traumatic stress disorder, because you're just so high strung the entire time because you're worried
Yeah.
about doing this thing and this job. And I had a couple of good friends of mine that when we got out or we got back and then they got out, they became cops, and I think that kind of hurt their career a little bit just because of how
Hmm.
aggressive they still felt compared to how they needed to treat civilians in the United States.
Yeah. It's not I think you put that in a really understandable kind of way wording and such, where it doesn't have to be some explosion or specific what you would see at a movie event. It's just simply put the job and the stress of the job. And I'll go beyond that, going back to kind of how you're describing, right, like boot camp and getting through your training, et cetera. It's forming you into a soldier, right? A soldier is not a civilian. So naturally, principally from the start, you're going to be in a different headspace and a different mode of action than you would be as a civilian. So to come back from a deployment and imagine whatever, that all of a sudden all of what just happened and all of what you were trained to be is gonna flip on a switch. I mean, it's not realistic or reasonable to presume that.
Oh yeah, great point. 100% agree.
Yeah. So you get back from that deployment. I guess what happens next? What's this next period for you?
Sure. So we get back from the deployment. I kind of talked a little bit about what I was struggling with, and when I got
Mm-hmm.
back, I struggled a little bit with separation anxiety because as
Mm-hmm.
reservists, when we demobilize, meaning we go back to the United States. We kind of go through classes. We start, just calming down, turning in our gear, going to counseling sessions of like if you're struggling with this, how to fill out a VA form, how to get your insurance, all these things, normal stuff. They're trying to rotate you back into the real world, not just drop
Mm-hmm.
you on your face. And so, anyways, a couple months of that, and then we turn around and we fly back to Oklahoma. That's where our little platoon kind of splits up. And I remember struggling distinctively with like leaving them. And I remember driving home from the airport with my parents in the car and feeling like I didn't know my parents or blend or
Yeah.
have anything in common with them anymore. But my guys that I just left, like, were like my family now. And it's still a very awkward feeling that I can still think of,
Yeah.
because these people raised me. They're my mom and
Yeah.
dad, but like I didn't feel at that time I had anything in common, right? Like that was
Yeah.
it. And so that was a little bit of a struggle. I felt alone. I think you'll hear a lot of
Yeah.
veterans talk about that in general when they get out, especially if they get out like really fast. But what helped me was that I didn't just get out. So I was still reserve. I still had time on the clock. I still had an enlistment to do, and so I had to go back and check into my duty station 30 days later. I had to go back and do it again and stay in the reserves. And then we ended up getting deployed for a little training exercise. And when I got deployed again, I was excited. So I was gone for about a month doing a joint operation with the Moroccan Army and the Marines, a lot of the Marines that I had deployed with. So I got to hang out with my bros again. Different
Mm-hmm.
scenario. Now some of them are going to college, some of them are doing things, some of them have jobs, and so I think it helped me like pull back and dial down a little bit from the combat scenario. And I watched guys that got out in between that phase, and they struggled the most because they didn't get to like almost, uh, decompress, for lack of a better
Yeah.
word. And
You,
so, yeah, go ahead.
that's a really interesting kind of point and situation you just brought up, which I haven't thought of. I don't think I've thought of ever really, is like having a before last deployment that's really kind of just like a training deployment, not high intensity, to at least create a bridge, exactly as you put it, right? From a high intensity environment to a non high intensity environment. Granted, again, you're still in the military, you're still a soldier, et cetera, but at least it's kind of a somewhat of a middle ground. So, I mean, that's a really interesting kind of theory.
Yeah, and it just kind of that's just how my time unfolded, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm fortunate it did. I'm
Hmm.
unfortunate it folded that way. So yeah, I go do that. I go to Morocco. I come back, and I honestly feel like I can tell you, like through my timeline and while I'm talking through it, like I feel better when I get back to Morocco. I feel like
Hmm.
okay, now's my time because I knew my time as a Marine Corps was getting shorter and shorter. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, now's my time to kind of go and find my path and go and do these, whatever it is. And so at that point, I got out of the Marine Corps essentially, or my IRR time I went into. And I go out and work on becoming a firefighter, something that was a paramilitary organization. I went and got my municipal fire safety degree at a local college. I started applying for Oklahoma City. I started applying for Edmond, and that was my next phase of life. Is really just going to school, and I was still working construction some days, and then I would go to school other days. So I was doing both.
Hmm. So, kind of before we phase into kind of civilian, at the end of that deployment, which is also coinciding with your service time, I believe, were you starting to think of next steps?
I honestly, what I would say I wasn't. I wish
Hmm.
I would have a little bit more.
Yeah.
My parents were still pushing on college pretty hard, and I was working full time. Right when I got out, I went right back to construction. And
Hmm.
so I wasn't that in depth. I kind of feel like I went down the firefighter route because it seemed easy. It seemed fun. It seemed like I could play still. I guess
Yeah.
looking back now, and this probably correlates to my where I am today, is I never really wanted I'm not meant for like a desk job. Like I didn't want to go get a job. I didn't want to go and
Yeah.
I mean I'm an infantry marine. I mean I'm an active guy. I like it would just be the disdain of me. But I also knew I needed to make money and I have some logical sense to myself here, I'd like to think,
Yeah.
to where it's like you gotta do something. But I feel like that's where people kind of get imprisoned. And you
Yeah.
got to get this trap of like, well, you have to give up. What happens is, and this is kind of what happened to me in my entrepreneur career, is you end up almost feel like you sell your soul to do the right thing or to make money, and then there's no optimism, there's no hope, there's no fun in life. And I think that burying that spirit of a young adventurous man, turning it into the responsible thing, it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to trade one for the other.
Yeah.
You can have fun as an adult. You can still have a little inner child and a kid and be do fun things and stuff, and you can still make money and be
Yeah.
responsible. You just have to do it in a different way.
Yeah, man, well said. And to give yourself a little bit of credit, I was asking if you were starting to think about next steps at the end of your service because it sounded like you really shifted into civilian profession, whether it was both looking for a firefighter or anyways working in construction. So I mean, that's something to I think be proud of, right? That you did actually carry on and continue instead of getting stuck in a hole.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, I think honestly, like I was a driven person, and anybody that's going through the Marine Corps infantry or any kind of service, a lot of people are very driven, and I think that you guys, if you're watching this, you don't want to lose that. You don't need to lose
Hmm.
that. You need to channel that and shift that. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I'll just be completely frank with my scenario. Right, I got out. I'm driven. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I go to what I started doing wasn't the best. I kind of went right back into drinking pretty heavy. I went back into partying. I was working, but I didn't really enjoy
Yeah.
work. I mean, I was working with my hands at least. I was welding, running skid steers. I was doing construction, concrete work. But it wasn't like my passion. And I hate the word
Hmm.
passion, but it wasn't like driven to do more. I wasn't going to become a multi-millionaire, have some aspirations to do this. And
Yeah.
so, but when I said, and the other thing, what I was doing as a young man, which most of us do, is I was chasing women. And so I had channeled that energy into chasing women and to trying to be Mr. Pimp, Daddy Pimp, and freaking doing all these things and sleeping around. And like, just to be completely honest, I haven't really talked about it, but it's the truth. It's like I was
Yeah.
finding my drive in the addiction of literally going out and seeing what kind of tail I could bring home and these kind of things. And I'm very fortunate that I met my wife when I did because I didn't really want that as a long run. Like it was a temporary win, but it was like
Hmm.
I wanted what I have now, and I wanted my wife, and that's why when I did meet my wife, I just stopped all the other relationships, all the other bullshit, and immediately committed to her. But what that allowed me to do, which is really important here, is that allowed me to take that energy now. Boom!
Right.
I take that energy now. I've stopped looking for the women and I can channel it into being an entrepreneur. And that is one of the key things that I think that has helped made me successful.
Yeah, really well said. I appreciate you sharing that. And, I'll take that as kind of, our transition period conversation. And I love how you mentioned, channeling the drive and placing it elsewhere. And what you brought up in terms of, meeting your wife, obviously that's a little bit harder to control per se, meeting right your significant other. So like to put that in a more broad way for people to kind of comprehend and potentially apply to themselves is find kind of your tribe, right? Like whether that be a sport, whether that be a gym, whether that be a club of some sort. It's not not party club, but activity
Yeah.
kind of a club. And then you could allow for those around you to help you channel in the right direction. Obviously, if you find your partner, then that's even more so kind of the benefit, as you put it, for your story. Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Totally agree.
So in this kind of transition period, and you could keep touching on it because I always like to highlight it's not necessarily like the day that you've finished your service. Rather, it's a kind of gradual process, or not even gradual, just a general process that could take years and such. So, anyways, you're working in construction. You're trying to find this firefighter role. You find your wife. What's happening kind of next in this scenario?
So I end up graduating and get my municipal fire safety degree. Then I skip off and try to get a firefighter job. At that time, a lot of other veterans were getting out. This is roughly around 2010,
Hmm.
2011. And a lot of people were getting out and doing the same thing I was doing. They're like, we don't know what to
Yeah.
do, so we're going to be cops and firefighters, right? It just tends to be something that coincides with paramilitary organizations. And so there would be like 1,000 applicants for a four-man position every third month or every quarter for Oklahoma City. And so you'd have all these dudes in a room taking a written test, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm not a good test taker, dude. I can physically fit. I'm good. I know I can qualify all this shit. I can put all the gear on and do all of it. But if I score an 85, I ain't even gonna get freaking looked at." And so I did. I
Hmm.
scored like an 85. I'd do it again. I scored like an 88. I got all like to around a 90 if I remember right, and it still wasn't enough for me to even like hit the top 1% in order to even get looked
Yeah.
at because of just how many people there were.
Hmm.
Um, and so I was like kind of distraught. I wasn't distraught. I was kind of upset, you know,
Yeah.
little like, damn, this sucks. How long am I going to try to get this job that pays me $30,000 a year? So that's kind of something that really was in the back of my mind too. Like, not a lot of money. I'm still going to have to work construction on the other days. I'm not doing it. And I wasn't like some of these guys, which is good for them, are like, I are built to be a firefighter. I want to be a cop. Like that's their legacy. But I feel like I got a lot of that out of my system
Hmm.
being in the military. Like I was like, you know, I'm cool. I've done my thing in my community, you know, my group. So at that point, I was still working out in the gym. I was still back in the gym. Never really quit. I would even while I was in the Marine Corps, I wanted to advocate that I was a huge advocate for working out, lifting weights, mainly because going back to like I said at 17, I didn't want to lose my size. I wanted to get jacked like Arnold. I wanted to look like Rambo. Like that was my whole thing. Like you know, it's nothing wrong with that, young men that you know
Hmm.
maybe get told that these days. If that's what you want to do, do it. And so I wanted to
Yeah.
be this guy, and and so I was always in the gym, and then when I get back to Oklahoma and I'm doing this, going through firefighter, trying to become a firefighter, one of my buddies is like, "Dude, you should start your own business. You grew up in construction, you know everything." And so that's when I'm like, "Oh, somebody else believed in me and gave me that little seed, planted that little seed for
Hmm.
me to go and do this." And that's all it took. And then I was like question after question for him, and he was already an entrepreneur. So the poor guy, he probably got bombarded with questions from me for the next freaking year, maybe more. But it was just, should I do this? Question that. Should I do this? How would I do this? Where do I start a company? What does that look like? Um, and then my parents, you know, my dad's an entrepreneur, so he has a concrete company. You know, he got transferred to Oklahoma as an engineer, but then he got let go, and then he started a concrete company. And so I'm just going to
Hmm.
give you a short version of that. But my point is, like, I grew up working for him, and him being an entrepreneur, I went to him again and was like, hey, I'm gonna probably end up quitting my job here pretty soon. I want to start my own building company. And he was like, "Yeah, as an entrepreneur himself, he's like, I admire that. I think that's a good idea." And he goes, "You know, I'll guide you along the process if you want me to. I'm your father. You know, I'm not going to." Essentially, I knew he wasn't gonna like take advantage of me or do a back end business deal or take all my profits and me work for free, essentially. And so I was like, okay, great, I will, 100%. And so I ended up like doing it with him on this first project and building this house with his supervision a little bit, you know, coming
Hmm.
by and checking some things every month or so. And then I turned around and sold that property, that house that I just built for, and made like 45 grand on the one deal. And when I did, I was like, oh my God, I had this check and I was like, $45,000. That was more than I was going to make the entire year. Now, granted, I was working for my dad, but I still wasn't
Yeah.
making over 45 grand a year. My dad's not one of those guys that like hooked me up with like the executive position. Okay, I was like I said, welding and running skid steers and working out of town. And
Hmm.
so I don't know if he wanted to kick me out of the company, but just didn't have the heart to do it, or if he was just trying to drive me to go on my own. But it worked. Um, so uh, I did that. I was like, this is insane. So I kind of had the conceptualization of how money can be made. That was like the first epiphany. Like
Yeah.
I really never understood how money was made. I was like, how do people make more money? How do they have more time than me? Or are they just getting paid $1,000 an hour? Like I never really understood it. Nobody taught me any of that.
Hmm.
And so I learned that in that one split second, and I got really hungry and really driven to do more because it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I started a building company. Long story short, I started building houses. I started doing a few spec houses, which are houses for sale. I started to do a few custom homes, which I'm like building them for people specifically from ground up, one-off plans. And I become a builder full time, you know, and I slowly transitioned and quit my job working for my dad. And I start building. Um, and then I moved into, making really good money. And then I'm getting married. So I'm fast forwarding this, but I'm getting married. I had 2 daughters. I built my own house. I got all these things going on for me at a pretty young age. I'm only like 29, 31 years old, roughly, doing all this, and I'm excited. But what I realized was like the time sucked. Like in order to do more and to make more money, I needed to grow and to get more projects. And in order to get more projects, I had to spend more time. And so I'm
Mm,
having these babies at home and this brand new wife, raising these kids. And I'm like, I'm very stressed out. I'm very stressed out trying to do all this, figure this all out, starting a business. And I remember being like, there's got to be another way. So I started reading books. I started reading educational books. I kind of started self-developing. At first, I kind of got a little bit of pushback in the building community, from people that I was hanging out with, like, oh, you're just listening to guru stuff. That's kind of the old generation's thought process on Tony Robbins and type stuff. And they're literally like hacking at me and stuff. And anyways, I go forward with it and continue to learn. And the best thing I ever did was self-develop, and really progress
sure.
mentally, and then also learn some more skills. And I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I was like, oh my God, this book is like the gateway drug to real estate investing. I need to learn about this. I need to own assets. I need to learn how to do banking. I need to understand debt. And so that's when I like got super laser focused and started to try to dive into that.
So before we continue in that path, I want to just kind of close out this transition period and any kind of specific advice you would give your hindsight, your younger self with the hindsight knowledge you have today, aka other veterans in that scenario.
Yes. Sometimes the thing will get you to your thing. So don't, just because this is a good term for veterans, especially, the mission itself never changes, but make sure you clarify the mission, but you may have to take a contingency route. So
Mm,
for me, what happened was you got to be careful when, that's why I say clarify the mission. So if you don't clarify the mission, then you're gonna feel like you're failing. But the mission for me was to be successful in my version of success. And I had to
mhm,
define what my version of success was. And my version of success isn't the same as my father's. It's not the same as my buddy that's an entrepreneur. It's different. I wanted my time back. I wanted to make good money. I wanted to live the life that I wanted to live. You can write all of that down, paper it out, and do all of this. Do the self development. Help. That's important. That's why self development is so important. But if your mission is to become the best builder, but you don't know why you want to become the best builder, then you're gonna continue on that mission. You're not gonna take any contingency routes, and you may end up living a life that you regret. And so
mhm,
sometimes the thing can get you to the thing, meaning like I went and became a builder because that's what I grew up in. That was what my skill set. I tell people this: if my dad was in oil and gas, I probably would have started a small oil and gas business. If my dad was
mhm,
in roofing, I probably started a roofing company. If he was a dentist, I probably would have tried to go down the dental hygienist route or some shit. Like you just kind of start with what you're given, but that doesn't have to be your end all be all. Don't give up, but you can have a contingency plan. But you need to clarify what your actual objective is. And I don't think adults do that in general. Veterans, people, whatever, they don't
yeah,
really do that. They think, because what they'll do is they'll go, I got a degree to be a doctor. I'm a doctor. But it's like, well, why did you decide to be a doctor? Well, when you were 21 years old, you wanted to make a shitload of money. Okay, well then focus on making the fucking money and stop being a doctor. If that's what you really want. That's just my 2 cents.
yeah. No, I think that's amazing advice. And as you put it, I mean, people don't, generally speaking, just don't do that. And the kind of tool that you can use is literally what you said, just map it out, right? Literally just write it down. Like what are you good at? What do you want? And then kind of find the path of getting there. And also, as you pointed, I mean, and I'm about to ask this and segue into kind of how you briefed a lot of hard work to get to where I stopped you is in mapping it out, understand you could have your contingencies, as you put it, you could have other routes to get to that end goal as you continue to figure it out. That's not easy, right? Like, I mean, how did you figure out, or I don't know, just have the balls to just say, yeah, I'm gonna throw down and build a house, right? Because that takes capital to do, right? Especially when you're just getting
Yeah.
started.
Yeah, yeah. No, good question. And so, really, I mean, it goes back to that inspiration. I've always been somebody like, I take it back to the gym because the same guy, I'd be like, how do I get arms like that? How do I grow that? And then they would give me information. I was a guy that was coachable. I look back,
Mm-hmm.
nobody ever used that word before, but I was coachable. I was like, okay, I'll go do that. right? Like, if he could have told me bullshit, he could have been like, you go eat 10 pancakes every day. And I'd have been like, okay, you go do that. Like, and
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just very open minded to maybe to a fault sometimes. Like, you can get bamboozled. I had a pretty good idea, but I'm like, okay, that guy said that, let's do it. Like, why wouldn't we do what this guy's telling me to do? He has that. And so he kind of
Yeah.
told me, like, start your own business, bro. You can do this. And I was like, should. I mean, I didn't, like you said, I didn't not believe in myself. It probably helps to have an entrepreneur father to see him like go and own a business. My
Sure.
grandfather, my dad's dad was an entrepreneur. My wife's dad, he owns a small little business. But so we have people around us that were making their own money, I'll call it.
Hmm.
So I didn't come from a dad that was like, I technically do, right? My dad has a college degree, he's an engineer, but he became an entrepreneur. And
Hmm.
so I didn't come from a dad that was like had a college professor job or was only a doctor or worked at a corporate place. And my whole entire family had that. That would have been a little bit harder. And I think some people may come from that, but just know that all it takes is one person to kind of push you and give you a little bit of that, to plant that seed, and you can become that entrepreneur. So yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
was balls, but like also at the same time, it's easier to do it sooner than later. So I started
Sure.
the company and started these things like really before I started having kids. Like I was
Yeah.
having kids like as the company was already taking off and doing its thing. And so I literally looked at it, and being in the Marine Corps helped because I'm like, he asked me this. This was huge. The guy that told me to start my own business. Good point. He said, I was really scared, like you mentioned. I was very scared to start this. Like you just said, I had to take on debt. I was gonna
Yeah.
have to freaking have somebody help co-sign for the loan. Like, and I didn't have that fucking money. I didn't know what's going on. And he's like, what's the worst thing that could happen? And he's like, really play it out. And I was like, he's like, dude, didn't you just get back from Iraq like 2, 3 years ago? And I was like, wow, I didn't think about that. Yeah, he's like, yeah. So, and he wasn't a military guy, but he was kind of like, bro, why are you scared?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I could go bankrupt or I could lose what I don't have. And he's
Yeah.
like, exactly. He's like, you don't have shit anyway. You might as well freaking, go for it. And I was like, well, I guess the worst case scenario, since I'm fortunate I have a mom and dad, I could go live in their basement, literally at their house or something. And my poor wife that I'm about to marry is going to have to struggle along with me, but at least I'm only 20. I think I'm like 26 at the time.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, dude, what are you talking about? Like, you should start. Like, and I was like, okay. The way he put it that way kind of gave me the punch in the gut that I needed.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about that is you had someone external who didn't serve, doesn't have the same kind of life experiences, who was able to kind of guide you into realizing your own perspective, right? Which was you already know what the worst is, and that's not going to happen, right? Meaning you've already deployed and you're not deployed. So the worst thing is what you just said, right? I mean, basement, and you're going to figure it out anyways eventually. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting and good timing, obviously too, right?
It's perfect timing. And I still apply that today. Like, it's still one of the biggest barriers for most of us to go out and be driven and have success. It's
Yeah,
not really our fear of failure, it's our fear of failure in front of other people.
yeah,
And so it really is. Like, if you think about failing, you're like, man, well, if nobody saw it, who would really care, right? Like, oh, I tried a business, and nobody knew that you went out and made $10 million for the last 10 years, and then you went back to zero. Nobody
right.
knew. You'd be like, ah, well, I'll try it again. But
You know,
if people in your town know or your friends know, you're like, oh my god, it's the worst. I never want to stretch to try to do that.
totally. Yeah. You know what that reminded me of, for whatever reason, what came to mind is like if you have a little kid, you have kids, whoever, niece, nephew, cousins, whatever. If they fall, hit their arm, whatever it is, and you don't kind of you watch them, but you don't really give them attention. They're just going to get up and continue. But if you go ahead and give them attention, you're going to see that all of a sudden going to start crying. So it's kind of to your point,
Exactly
right?
right.
If no one knows what's happening, like you'll just carry on. If people are looking at you under a microscope, then you're going to start crying and not make moves.
100%.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, so we got to the point where you said your business was starting to grow. I'd love for you to kind of tap into real quick, or as long as you'd like, kind of that process of leveraging debt and kind of how you were able to compound on your business.
Good point. So as a builder, what I was able to do is I had enough business going, and I'd done enough deals or built homes. Now, mind you, as a builder, all I knew was how to build.
Mhm.
So I knew how to build a house and sell a product. Now, what I didn't know was how to invest and understand debt and understand the liabilities that I was even taking on. Because I was just blinded by like, well, hell, if it worked once, it can work again. If it works another time, it can work again. And if I mess this one up, then I'll build another one and it'll pay for that one. And that was literally my perspective. So 2018 comes around. I have two babies. My wife and I have been married for a few years now. I mean, I'm talking like my girls are 13 months apart, so my wife's a
Hmm.
little stressed out about this point.
Sure.
And I had this grand idea to build two houses, these $2 million houses. Now, mind you, we're in Oklahoma, right? That's a normal house here in San Diego in 2024, but in Oklahoma in 2018, these are 5,000 plus square foot houses on acreage. Like these are
Compounds.
monsters. These are badass houses. And
Yeah.
so I built these two. I have a partner on one because I thought I was smart diversifying that one, which I was. And then I have the other one over here that I'm doing on my own. And I'm like in my head, if I could sell these things for market value once I finish them, I could make 200,000 a piece on them. And I'm like,
Hmm.
dude, I'm gonna kill it this year. I'm gonna build these houses. I'm gonna make 400,000 just on these two houses. Like how awesome is that? Like I'm really going big time, right? I was in some of these self development books and reading these 10x Grant Cardone things, and I'm like, freaking, let's go, let's get after it. And what I quickly realized was that things happen for a reason, and I couldn't sell these properties as fast as
Hmm.
I thought. So I'm paying interest payments on them month
Yeah.
after month after month after month, while paying my own payment, while trying to grow the business, while trying to just freaking survive.
Yeah.
Um, that was one of the hardest lessons I had to learn. And what I realized at that point was like, I need to learn more. And that's when I kind of started even learning about the real estate stuff. I started learning about debt more. I started learning about how to use debt and how I can mitigate making risks like this because I couldn't rent these homes out and cover the debt. I couldn't do anything except for sell them. And now I have to hold on to them until they sell. What a horrible, essentially gamble slash investment, what some people might call it, at the
Hmm.
way I did it. And people do that all the time and they just don't know what they don't know. And so I realized, though, at that time when I was struggling, financially big time, that was what I needed to learn. That was the lesson I needed to learn. And it's what ultimately pivoted me to sign up and start educating myself in real estate programs, becoming an investor, how to flip property, how cash conversion cycles, how to make money faster, how to have a contingency plan for a property that you can't sell. Maybe you can rent it out. Maybe you can sell or finance it. All of these things that I didn't have any understanding of, but I started to dive into and understand debt a lot more and understand good debt versus bad debt, understand liabilities versus assets, understand a balance sheet. Like that, I needed to learn the business side. I needed to learn the finance side. What I had spent the last X amount of years as a builder learning was, how to find lots, how to be the best
Hmm.
builder, what tiles are popular, what designer to use, what real estate agent works, what neighborhood's coming up, all of those things, which weren't going to make me more money. They were just going to make me build a better product and then in hopes that I could sell it.
Right. So that circumstance was actually what I wanted to dig into, which is, all right, you're building these products, right? These houses. What happens if you can't sell? And to kind of give a secondary answer to that, as you were starting to describe, seems like there's ways to leverage that fact and not kind of be screwed, with the fact that you can't sell it on in the time frame that you wanted or needed.
Yeah, understanding your market's huge, right? Like, so I'll give you a scenario on those two projects. If I would have raised private capital instead of having banking, and then I
Mm,
would have pushed the interest payments to the end, and I would have partnered with somebody that had the money, the liquidity to do all of those and split
mm,
profits with them, I wouldn't have had any risk. I'm just buying time,
I see.
right? And so, but what I do now and what I started to do that kind of got me out of that was I started understanding affordable housing. So I think of it like a pyramid. So at the very top, you have the most expensive property in your area, and at the very bottom, you have the most affordable. And so no matter what type of market, no matter what kind of shift happens, everybody has to downgrade if the market goes south. And there's always going to be people that need to at least leverage into the affordable space. And so what I realized was like, I want to start doing properties that are $100,000, $200,000, not $1 million in my area, right? And so, because the good news is that with those types of properties in Oklahoma, you can rent them out and still cash flow. So you can
Hmm.
rent them out. Maybe your payment's $700 a month. You can get $1,250 or $1,300 a month in rent. Now it makes sense that if you can't sell the damn thing, you can turn it into a rental and then you can keep moving, right? Totally different concept. And I've been able to make like $45,000 on one flip of a home that was like 180,000 sell price, and have like a short cash conversion cycle, meaning that I
Hmm.
bought it and sold it within like 3 to 6 months, versus going and building a whole ground up construction project in Oklahoma that was $1 million risk that I only made $50,000 on. So the risk versus the reward is very important. But what happens is being a builder was a lot more sexy. It was a lot
Yeah.
more attractive. It's the guy with the new truck. It's the sign. It's the freaking logos. It's the guy on the magazines. It's the look at my multi-million-dollar project I just built. I'm the developer. And the guy that is building and flipping freaking $100,000 houses is kind of like, who's that guy? He's a nobody. But that
Yeah.
guy is probably way more rich than the freaking showboat builder.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. So, out of curiosity on that kind of same trajectory of what you're saying here, is there still risk um, in that strategy? That's the word I was looking for.
And the strategy that I teach now and I implement with some of my inner circle students is essentially we create contingency plans. The objective is
Mm-hmm.
to take down affordable housing, but where we mitigate a lot of the risk. There's always risk, no matter what. But this we're mitigating it for the most part. And the way we mitigate it is if we can't sell the property as a flip at first, what we do is we already ran our numbers that we could turn it into a rental. And that's our contingency plan. And then there's a tertiary plan where we could turn around and sell this property and we be the bank and we'll finance it. Even though we have
Right.
debt on it, there's still an ability that we finance the property to somebody else. And so there's three different scenarios instead of just having one option. And right, like if so it may not want to keep rentals, but what it allows you to do is it allows you to buy time. And so while
Mm-hmm.
you put a tenant in there, they're paying down the debt, the property's going up in value, your money's not gone, you still have it, and then when the market comes back up, you can turn around when the tenant's lease is up and sell the property. But so what it allows you to do is keep moving, because what happened with these two properties that I have, these two built new construction ones, is I was handicapped. Like I was on full stop. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
even go out and get any more money. I couldn't do anything until these projects sold. And I couldn't afford to rent them because the market rent was probably 3 grand and my payments were freaking 6 grand a month.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
upside
Yeah.
down.
As you're describing that, I was going to say it sounds like you're in trajectory to essentially just become a lender.
Yeah, I do a lot of that now too. I actually do a lot of
Sure.
lending.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So I'd love for you to kind of plug in right now, kind of the two. I know you've been mentioning it, but giving you kind of like a formal opportunity to talk about your two business areas, your two focuses today.
Good. Perfect. So what we do now is we have a pretty significantly large single family, some small multi and commercial in Oklahoma portfolio of assets.
Hmm.
And so, those are holds that we have are either rentals, they're seller finance deals. These are cash flow plays. These are long money plays. And what we're looking at doing right now, I should say looking at doing, we're going to make happen since the end of this year. 2025, we're going to start doing things in Southern California. So anything here in San Diego County, we're going to start looking at it's sub 1 million or 1.5 million dollars, which is technically the affordable housing right out here, which is wild. But that's what we're gonna be doing some flips on those. We'll do a few of those a year. We may hold on to some of those assets. We'll kind of get our feet wet and really see what we want to do and what fits us well. Um, and then also that's my real estate investing business. And then I also
Hmm.
do a lot of coaching and consulting. And so I have multiple programs. And so two of my programs, one is fitness mindset development, because as you guys have heard a little bit about my story, it's what's super important to me. It was the foundation of how I got started, these disciplines, getting ourselves right, being confident. Because you asked a good question. You're like, well, how are you so confident? I think because I had proven to myself that I was going to show up to the gym every day, because I had proven to that guy that I had, my buddy that talked me into it, that I was going to show up every day. He probably would have not said you should start a building company if he knew I was like the guy that shows up once a month, right? Like, so
Yeah.
we have to create the best version of ourselves first. That's a very affordable program. And then I have a real estate investing program for people that want to get into real estate, want to learn how to buy and hold property, fix and flip property. They really want to understand the game and take it to the next level. And that's my inner circle. And so those are the main programs that I have, and I help people along the way in either realm with personal development, because I don't think your financial development will ever surpass your personal development. And if it ever does, right, like look at the examples, like people that win lottery tickets, people that are in the sports athletes that get overpaid, their personal development's way far behind than their financial development, and they ended up what? Losing it, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's a staple.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So, first of all, I'll put, all of that information in the show notes. So if anyone's looking to reach out to Austin, he answers, right? I heard him on, like I said before, Mike Drop podcast. I reached out. I was like, Austin, you got to get on the show, man. And here we are. So, he'll answer so long as you put in the effort to reach out. So that's awesome, man. So as we're closing out professional side, I want to give you kind of a time to formally say any translatable skills, military to profession. We touched on a handful as we were going through our conversation, but you could say the same ones, whatever comes to mind. Plug that in.
Super important. It's something that I feel is part of my brand, which is improvise, adapt, and overcome. Something I learned
Mm,
from the Marine Corps, and it applies to entrepreneurship. It applies to everything, personal development, but definitely as an entrepreneur, you've got to improvise, adapt, and overcome. Things are not going to go your way. Sometimes there's so many problems, attacking you. And some of you guys have jobs. You have W-2 jobs. Maybe you're salespeople. Maybe just personal situations. Remember that improvise, adapt, and overcome. You're always pressing forward. So I think
yeah,
that's one of the biggest translatable skills that I've carried on through my whole entire. It's just like keep going, right?
yeah,
Keep going, no matter what. That's what the Marine Corps taught me. Same with
yeah,
business because I've been hit over the head so many times in business. Things aren't always going to go how you want them to go. Things don't get funded. Things cost more than you expect. You deplete your savings account to get this deal done, and then you get screwed on it. And you got to just freaking keep going. Like there's things that happen, guys.
yeah, man. Keep going. That's one of my go-to kind of just principles in life. So yeah, I appreciate you using that as your translatable skill. Awesome, man. So closing out the show, we got two last questions. One I know is dear to your. I think both of them actually, from what you said, are important for you as well. So we'll start with wellness practice. What does that look like for you?
So I love to go to the gym. I've transitioned. I tell people this: how have I stayed in fitness for almost over 20 years? Because when I get bored, I switch it up, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I don't want people to think like, well, I'm still doing just bicep curls every Wednesday for the last 20 years. Like, that's not the reality of it, dude. Like, I've gone from I spent like 4 years in CrossFit gyms, so I loved CrossFit for a while. I did that. My wife even competed a little bit, and like my kids were involved in it. I loved it. I loved the community. I loved working out outside. And then I just kind of got bored with that and transitioned out of that. I did jujitsu up until I got my almost what was I, a blue belt, a two-stripe blue belt, and then kind of fell off. And I did that for like 6 years, right?
Hmm.
And I always kept a staple of weights because I wanted to keep my physique. I think the physique was important. It adds to my confidence, makes me
Hmm.
feel good about myself, makes me strong in all the other areas. Um, and so, that's my routine always evolves somewhere around the fitness realm. So right now, my routine and the staple to me is I go to the gym. I like to wake up early. Typically during the weeks, I'm waking up between 4 and 4:30. I'm at the gym by 5. I like to get my cardio in. I like to do my weightlifting, whatever program I'm taking or I'm on or doing. And that right there kind of gets me geared up to come back home and have a positive attitude. That's the
Yeah,
most
I'm curious.
important.
I'm totally with you, man. That's awesome. And out of curiosity, because you live in San Diego, do you feel that culture like around you is fitness because weather, beach, etc.?
So coming from Oklahoma, I feel like people are definitely more fit,
Yeah.
100%. And it's people walk more, people are outside more. I
Hmm.
met you meet the average dad out here, and he may one out of well, I'll probably say like 3 out of 5 surf, right? Or
Yeah.
they ride mountain bikes, or they do something like that's a huge culture out here. And it was one of the driving factors for my wife wanting and I wanting to move out here was
Yeah.
like we wanted that in Oklahoma. We're pretty outdoor people. We don't like to be pent up in the house all day. There's a few times we're homebodies, but not a lot of times. We want to go
Yeah.
out, have adventure, go on hikes, go on walks, go do things with the kids, go skate, whatever it is. And in Oklahoma, I don't think it's the people so much. I think it's the weather. I think
Correct.
it's the ability to do things. The weather makes a huge impact on people's moods. So yeah, I would double down on saying that people in San Diego are much more active.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Bounce around quite a bit throughout life, and I've noticed like the different culture or attitudes, which yeah, I mean, I think revolve around weather. You can certainly see it. Like for example, lived in New York City for a long time. Like winter comes and everyone's grumpy. Summer comes and everyone's all of a sudden happy, right? Because you could be outside, you could walk around more and such. So, it's cool that you said that and also experience the same kind of a thing.
Yep.
Awesome. So, last question is any book or books you'd like to recommend to the audience?
Absolutely. So I'm going to name a few. So one,
Yeah.
if you guys are watching this and you're thinking about real estate or you want to understand just more what I'm saying and some of it went over your head, the book I mentioned, Rich Dad Poor Dad, super important. It's kind of like I
Mhm.
said, the gateway drug to real estate investing. It kind of opens your mindset to thinking and understanding about what assets are, why we do what we do, how to get wealthy. Like nobody
Mhm.
ever really answers how you can get wealthy and rich. And this book kind of will break it down and give you a good storytelling version of it. So Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then another great book that I dove into pretty hardcore after I got out of the military and started my business was Jocko Willink's book Extreme
Mhm.
Ownership. I really attached to his book because he's a veteran and he was a leader and he's an admirable leader. And so I didn't want to just pick up some guru's book, and I really didn't. I kind of had an ego about me being a Marine Corps vet stuff, and like, some of these business guys will talk like, well, this is like war, but if they haven't ever been to war, it kind of is off-putting. You guys
Yeah.
know what I'm talking about that are watching this. So, being a vet, I was like, this motherfucker's been to war. He was a leader. He's a badass dude. He knows jujitsu. He's a father. I'm like, I can him and his crew, right? Like on Leif Babin, all those guys.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I can wrap my head around. So it opened my mind up to being able to listen to the audio book without having any reluctancy or ego. So that one, so Reach Out Poor Dad, Extreme Ownership, and then another good one. I'll give you two more. Grant Cardone's 10x. The 10x rule is really
Mhm.
good because it just talks about like how hard really business is and how you have to do 10 times more things and you have to try 10 times harder to actually get an outcome. That one's
Mhm.
huge. I like his mindset on that. He's a pretty aggressive guy, so I vibe with it. And then Outwitting the Devil. I always love telling people to listen to, or if I listen to audiobooks, so if you want to read
Yeah.
them, read them. But Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. He has a couple other great books, but Outwitting the Devil really hit me because it talks a lot about what we were talking about, which is the fear. It talks about fear versus faith. And why do we have these fears? Why are we programmed to have these fears about failure, about not being successful, about not taking the risk? And I think it's huge that that book helped me. Even I listen to that book still often now, and I probably listen to it like 100 times, but every once in a while I'll listen to it again, and it'll just bring these key points up in my head. Like
Yeah.
we're creating these fears, we're creating these false realities or these false situations in our heads, but why are we doing that? Is it because of accident? No, a lot of times it's because of the way we brought up, how we believe, and our perceptions. And so that book's really important um, to change your mindset from having fear, to actually having faith that whatever you're going to do will work out.
Awesome, man. Those are awesome recommendations. Extreme Ownership is one of my favorites, also for the reasons that you pointed out. So yeah, I really appreciate those. Those books, as well as Austin's info, are going to be in the show notes. Thanks so much for jumping on today, man. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I learned a lot. Excited to share it and let people hear it.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate it, bro. Great show.
Absolutely, absolutely. Take care, everyone. Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build.